What's up?
Hey folks, Jerry here. Welcome to the Pioneers of Insight podcast, a show that explores the wipeouts, crack-ups, and recoveries of inspiring and influential people. Here you'll get the stories of the quest to find success beyond the struggle and the great leaps of innovation that take us there. People that sound like this.
JLD.
What's up, man?
Jerry.
What's up, man?
What's up, brother?
Thank you so much.
Well, I'm
Jerry.
excited to be here, Jerry. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Fun today.
Keep telling your story as well.
Yeah, man.
How you doing, my man?
Pretty good. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Today we deep dive the life story of Shannon Kaysen, who found his voice as a storyteller after a divorce and big trouble caused by a gambling addiction. All right, strap in, folks, as we head into a story about trust and passion and moving forward when hope is hard to come by. Enjoy, and I will catch you on the other side.
This one's interesting in terms of history. Yeah.
Cool. That's cool.
So Shannon Kaysen of Homemade Stories, welcome to the Pioneers of Insight podcast. So glad you're here.
Glad to be here, Jerry. Glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
All right, so Shannon, strap in. Here we go.
I think I've always been a watcher in a sense, like a background person. You know, I'm out front sometimes, but I do look at myself and watch things a lot. Like I'll see things and I'll just like document them in my head. And over time, when I felt the release to kind of share what I saw throughout life, you know, I stepped into becoming a storyteller. So now I'm a storyteller to others. So I tell stories on paper, online, or on stages, and I do the storytelling thing. So
I lost $1,200 on the blackjack table, and overdrew my checking account.
I don't know if that's the answer to the question, but my show, I guess, is storytelling.
So I hear this. I'm an observer, but what's interesting about you already, for the listener, is everybody here is likely here because they know the guy who steps forward, right? What do you think you have to summon to be able to do that in your life?
Well, stepping forward is fearful. Okay, so like high school, grade school, around family, events, different things, I'm more like friends, even friends. Most of my friends, my best friends, have been outgoing people, more extroverted. My friends are more extroverted and I'm more introverted, right? But not like totally introverted, but just more than them. So all my best friends have been like outgoing people. So I'm more the person who's like, who talk when we're around each other and I'm telling them what I saw in certain situations and we had these good conversations, but they are the more extroverted person. And I've always been comfortable with that, like a more extroverted person being by my side, you know, and me being able to observe and be creative and being appreciated in that sense. So, and I was later in life that I jumped out there to say, oh, I want to be in front to be able to share a little bit of the things that I've observed over time. And that took a long time for me to kind of get to that point. And when I did, it was more purpose driven. I felt like that's what I was meant to do at that moment. So it was fear, but I felt like the stories I tell or the things I write, that they need to be heard. and that would conquer the fear for me. Yeah, I would rather not go on stage. I would rather sit at home and write. Just being real. But the stage helped. It was something that took off more so than the writing. So I started doing more stage stuff. But the thing is, like, I'll be more vulnerable, and people wanted to hear those stories that I wanted to share. So I'll start doing it because I started hearing like it would help people.
So you're an introvert that has a strong extrovert, like you could step out there. But when you suddenly shift from being a person that's comfortable in a certain way of being and you go to another way of being, there's often a major transition point in your life, like something that shakes you up enough that it compels you to take the step forward. Did you find that there was a low point in your life that helped to create that shift where you were like, all right, there's got to be a change here, or I got to exercise a new part of myself?
That's a great point. I don't know if you can cuss on this show.
Oh, totally.
But I got to a point where I just didn't give a fuck. I didn't care. I had just had a daughter, Madison, and we had been going through, my first wife, we had been going through IVF to have her, and it wasn't working. And we ended up having her just the natural way. She ended up getting pregnant. And we had a tough relationship, In 3 months after she was born, me and my ex-wife, we split up. And she moved all the way across the country. So it was like, I just had a daughter that we had been striving to have, and now she's all the way across the country. And then I lost the job, and then I started dating more, because I was separated. A woman I was seeing, she got pregnant, and this is like 4 months after my daughter and my ex-wife left. So, and then I lost my job. So I lost my job. I got a pregnant girlfriend. My family is gone. My first wife and my first daughter is all the way across the country. And all I had was time on my hands. And I'm sitting at home, and I started writing more, and I didn't really care. Like, I would go on stages and do stuff. I didn't really care what anyone thought.
How the hell do you do that? So I'm getting a sense of your resilience and strength already. So here you are, your life's kind of falling apart a little bit, right? You have an unexpected family member showing up. You're in a relationship with a woman you're not sure you want to be connected with, but she's going to be the mother of your child. But somehow Shannon Kaysen is resilient enough to be like, I'm going to sit down and start writing about this. And even more, I'm going to take this to the stage.
I think I was looking at other people too. And through all the smiles and everybody showing like they doing so well, I could see the cracks in them too. So I saw my own cracks. I'm just like, I'm going to share my cracks. I was gambling at the time still. So I had a gambling addiction. So I noticed like comedians would get notoriety. They would build careers. Like there would be movies and books and everything about their problems. Richard Pryor, drug addict, marital issues, probably abuse and all these other situations, but being honest about them, he's an icon, So I'm like, the rise is in like digging down, like you rise from digging down, almost going into some of the things that you're trying to hide from everybody. The thing you're trying to hide from everybody might be the thing that's your way out, So I started sharing about my addictions. I started talking about some of the things that I was trying to hide and being honest about it. And that people started listening to those things. And I felt a lot freer to be able to do it. So it felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders because I wasn't trying to hide as much anymore.
I want to go back to your superpower a little bit. I hear the observer that you're able to look at culture and look at some of the great entertainers and be like, you know what? They got there from sharing the hard stuff. But I don't know you, Shannon, but I can already hear it, that there's depth. Did you have powerful mentors in the past that were like, maybe they were spiritual mentors? I don't know. They're like, there's value in being vulnerable.
Probably more so mentors I didn't know who seeing the vulnerability, because the mentors I knew were all hiding. I had mentors who I could look at and say they were successful, but I knew they were hiding certain things. People always held me close. So if I was in church, I was like one of the closer people. If I was in family business, I'd be traveling or something, so I'll see everything, but I would see it and I would be like, okay, they strong, but they hide this little point about themselves, you know what I'm saying? And that could blow them up if somebody knew this. But I started seeing more so, I guess, outside of the people I knew. Listening to the podcast really helped me.
So it was a reach out a little bit too. Yeah.
Yeah. Listening to the podcast I was able to hear other people go through certain situations, and I'm like, oh man, that sounds similar to me.
Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't want to, lead the listener nor you in the wrong direction here. Sound like you're a keen observer. The pain allowed you to really kind of amplify your observations. You're like, okay, well, I'm in a tough spot here. I'm going to turn this observing up and figure out how to get out of this. An option for you was, I'm going to take some risks here. And some of the risks are going to be sharing my own stuff.
Well, I was used to risk. I'm like, I'm going to gamble a little bit on myself here.
Yeah. Well, that's a big leap. And that's why I'm spending so much time on it. What allowed you to take that leap? And that's why I went to the mentorship a little bit. I was going down that path because often I hear when people are able to do that later in life, somewhere in the past, somebody was saying, look, this stuff can be valuable. But it sounded like you have an inner resourcefulness that you're able to do that.
It wasn't so much watching people, because I grew up in a household where keep private things private. Tell what's happening in the house. My grandmother, she dressed up to go to the grocery store. I grew up in a household where you gotta shine. My dad, he's shining when he go out. So I'm seeing him and he's looking good. Everybody in Detroit, they used to think we was millionaires, based off of the things you see. So for me, all that shining and you got to look good every time you're doing that, those things for me, I would notice like, okay, at home, it might be a little different. And everybody does it. I mean, I came out of hip hop culture. Hip hop culture is built on talking about stuff that you don't have or bloating yourself up. But there's a balance of that. I think you can talk yourself into certain things, but then there's a balance of reality as well. So I decided to go the reality route.
Well, maybe your family had a lot to do with it, and I'm starting to hear it a little bit. When you grow up that close to a powerful figure, maybe like your father, and you see the disparity between what's on the outside and what's on the inside, and you're already sensitive person enough to pick up on these things. Maybe you just early on, there was a personal message to yourself. I'm going to be real. Was there another blow up point? Because that often helps too. Meaning like maybe you have a sense of what you want to become and who you want to be. And then there's an event in your life that's so powerful. You're like, oh man, I don't have the strength to be that person. This blew everything up. Did you have one of those?
Well, I just think, my first family moving away and then creating a new family, losing a job and having to restart, those things for me were like, okay, if I'm starting new, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to do the thing I want to do. And the thing I want to do has always been writing or telling stories, or I wanted to be involved in something creative. I mean, I have friends who would like get on me, because they would be like, Shannon, man, you my inspiration, and I'm doing creative stuff. Mm-hmm. And you working as a plumbing wholesale manager what are you doing? You know, and I'm like, man, I got to make money. I got to do this. And I think for me, it just got to the point where I didn't care anymore. If I got to struggle for a few years, or if I have to go through some hard points, that's fine. You know, it's all going to add to the story of my life, you know? So for me, it was just like making that decision. Like, I'm going to go do what I want to do. And this is a difficult thing because a lot of times I come from Detroit.
Where else but Detroit will you find everything you need for your
I'm from an industrial town where I went to Michigan State University, but their mindset is on working at the plant. So working at one of the big three, which at that time, big three, we had Ford, Chrysler, General Motors, and people wanted to work at a plant because a plant provided a good life for family. You know, so our fathers, our grandfathers, all worked at the plant. Even mothers and grandmothers, they worked at the plant or something. So you could provide a good life. But that's the mindset. Like, you got to work somewhere. You got to do something. So it was hard for me to even envision that something I write become a movie or something. It'd take a long time for me to even see that. So I had to move outside of Detroit. When I moved to Chicago, I started seeing a few more things. And I started seeing people who I'd be like, man, I can do that. You know, I started listening to podcasts and I would listen to shows, or I would see people who actually wrote stuff that would be on TV. And I'd be like, you know, I would respect the person, but I would be like, man, I don't really see them that much better than me. You know, I would see myself in a good light as well. I'd just be like, I could do that.
Can I ask you a question in here? So I hear you saying it was hard for me to see myself doing what others had done. Here's Detroit. You're coming from a cultural setting that's like, look, this is what you do. What was it like for you in terms of moving forward with your family? Did you find that there was also maybe that same message was being encouraged by your family? Like, you had to break away from something? Like, you go out there, you get a job. You go out there, life happens this way. Was that part of the struggle for you to see yourself being able to do those things?
Yeah. I mean, even now, there's certain family members be like, okay, yeah, you've done that long enough. Why don't you go get a job? You know, people would be like, hey, why don't you, so even now, it'll be a pressure to go work at somebody else's job, because that's the Detroit mindset in a sense at that time. You know, now it's kind of growing, but at that time it was go work at a plant and you can make a good salary and work long enough to get your pension, get some good benefits. Those were the measures of success in a sense. It took a long time to even break from that mindset. And those mindsets are really, really strong, you know. So it took for me to move from Detroit. And though Chicago is an industrial city, I didn't understand everything because I'm not from there. So, but there was a lot more creativity going on. I mean, Detroit is one of the most creative places on earth, but people were actually making a living doing creative stuff in Chicago. So I could see that and I'd be like, wow, okay, they got all these things going on. I'm going to get involved.
Let me ask you for a story here. So you step out of Detroit, and I hear this. There's kind of like a gravity there, meaning it's hard to pull away from a vision of yourself because of all you've heard about what you're supposed to be. You go to Chicago, you're in a new setting. It sounds like it took a lot of times for the hammer to hit the nail before you're like, wait a minute, I could do this stuff. Do you remember a moment where there was a transition point like that, where the light bulb came on? You're like, not just like, I think I can. You were like, oh yeah, I can do that.
Okay. So a friend of mine from Michigan State University, she had we had always talked. We went to the same church, and I think it was a little bit of attraction there or something like that. So we would talk, kept in touch, and we would talk about writing. We would talk about interesting things. We would talk about movies, and both of us wrote, or we called ourselves, amateur writers in a sense. So long time had passed. Facebook happened. We got back in touch, and she sent me some. I was asking her about writing, what movies she's seen, and she had sent me some of her writing, and I read it, but I hadn't wrote anything in a long time. So I was out of work. I had a lot of time on my hands. So I'm like, I'm going to write something. And I started writing this story. It was kind of like a crime fiction story. It like took me away. It was about this guy who was like a fixer for rich and famous people in California. And I finished the story and I sent it to her, and she was wild by it. She was like, man, this the first story you wrote? And I'm like, yeah, how and that like turned me on. I would go to the library and I would walk around the fiction and I would read the first chapters in all these great authors, their first book. I would find out what's their first book, and I would read the first chapter of it. And then I would compare my writing to their first chapter. I'd be like, man, I'm not that far off. This dude or this dude or this dude. So I would really get into my readings, and also I'd just be inspired to write these stories, and then I started to share the stories, and I saw other people like them. So I was like, man, I'm gonna keep this going.
Well, there's some more of your superpowers that are showing up. So for you didn't just pick up the gauntlet and say, I'm going to write. You have a passion. You ignited a passion. You were able to move with it. But I also hear this, dude, that's a pretty creative approach. You go to the library and there's a part of yourself that's like, don't go to a meetup group or something with a bunch of people at Starbucks that are sitting around trying to figure out writing. You went to the greats and you started to compare yourself. So that shows a lot of insight and a lot of personal wisdom. So let's take our listeners forward a little bit. So you have this big kind of aha moment. You get a sense of what you can do. You're still in that difficult place in your life. Where did you go after that in terms of developing your skill set and your career?
So we lived on 41st in Michigan. That was where we were living at the time. And they had a Martin Luther King library down the street. So I went to the library and they had a program there where people would read their stories. But this was like people from the neighborhood, older people, some poets, some young people, and just be like a circle of people. And we would all read our stuff. And they put out a book. I forgot what the book was called, but they would put that book out, and they included one of my really, really short stories. I mean, this wasn't even 100 words, but it was like a little bitty snippet of a story that you could kind of like jump into a scene. And I always like that, where it don't have to be like you can create a universe in a sentence. Mm-hmm. Where a person can read a sentence and they can zone out in that sentence, fill in the character or fill in the scene. They just from a sentence, Mm-hmm. So I like that kind of thing. So I gave them like this paragraph and they put it in the book. And then we moved to the north side of Chicago. Chicago, segregated city, south mm-hmm. side, west side, north side. Mm-hmm. It's different, different cultures, different people. It's the city of neighborhoods. So every neighborhood is like mm-hmm. a different culture. Mm-hmm. So we moved to the north side to Logan Square area, which is, I think it's like a German type of area.
A lot of Poles up there too.
Yeah, Polish area too. So we're in that area, which is different from 41st in Michigan. It's a walking neighborhood. I can walk around, see different things. There was a bookstore down the street. And I went to the bookstore and I saw this thing called Story Club. And I'm like, oh man, they do like readings here too. And Northside had a lot more readings that was going on. So I went to a place called Story Club. It was at Uncommon Ground, like this coffee shop, bar, restaurant thing. And I'm listening and I started telling my stories there. And from there, people really was picking up on it. It was like, and then they asked me to feature and tell stories. And that was the first place that asked me to feature. A lady named Dana Norris. She was like, I really like your stories. Why don't you be a featured storyteller at our next show? And I told stories that I'm telling now to this day are the same stories I was telling at that, 8 years ago.
What would you tell the listener was critical about that time period for you? Because I can hear it in terms of where we are at in the interview. This is like a turning point, right? Where you're starting to see the effort that you put into what you're doing is being validated and reflected by other people in return. Maybe for those others that are out there that haven't reached that point, what do you think was important about getting to that and moving through it?
For me, and you brought it up, I was looking at people who were bigger than me. I was reading books that had won all these awards, or just people who had defined the era in a sense. So I'm reading Raymond Carver. I'm reading Elmore Leonard. I'm reading just any book I can find. Ray Bradbury. I'm reading all these kind of books. Or even the comedy. I go to open mics. I wasn't following those guys. I was watching the great comics on TV, or on the radio. And I was comparing with them more so than I was comparing with the people who I would be around. So when I told a story, it was different. I knew it was different. Mm-hmm. I knew it was different because I wasn't even following the contemporaries, like the people at that time in space. I was going back to the 50s and the 20s. Mm-hmm. I was reading old stuff.
This is a big responsibility to oneself, right? To say, I'm going to commit to learning the craft of writing and storytelling. But there was something that was different about you that you could go, I'm going to sit in the same room as the greats. What do you think was about you at that time? Or that even, I'm going to ask the same question I asked before, that became an option.
I think I was jealous in some ways because my school, that wasn't like a high value. You get what I'm.
Yeah.
We had good English teachers and we had that kind of thing going on, but it wasn't like we was all sitting around reading short story books or we did read Salinger. We read Catcher in the Rye. I remember when I read that in high school, I was like, man, I want to write like that. That was because I was like, man, I could see that kid. I was like, man, I know that kid. So I was like, but that was a kid at that time. And I feel like as kids at the time I grew up. So I'm like, man, I want to write about the time I grew up, like that story.
Desire is what you're saying.
Yeah. It was like I knew, like I was reading at the time I was supposed to be reading it. Cause it was like, it was really causing inspiration. I wasn't reading it to be cool. Like I listened to certain friends. I mean, Chicago has a little pomp and circumstance. People would be, I read this, I read that, I'm trying to remember names right now, the authors, but I would just be grabbing them and reading them. And it wasn't for nobody else. It wasn't for like, so I can brag to friends. Oh, did you read the new, Dave Eggers book? I was reading it like, what did he do right here? Okay, for my next story, I'm going to write a story all in indirect dialogue, or whatever. I was doing whatever I wanted to do.
You weren't reading just to promote yourself. You weren't reading to get. You were reading to be fed.
I had been around greats in hip hop. In hip hop in Detroit, they had a place called the Hip Hop Shop. And I was an observer there too. Mm-hmm. I wasn't like one of the guys out front, but you had guys like Eminem. You had guys like JD, who was Jay Dilla, making music. And these are people who the whole world considered great now, but we was just in a store on 8 Mile, on 7 Mile, We was in a store on 7 Mile. So it was like the scene of storytelling in Chicago at the time that I was getting involved. I'm thinking about it like the Hip Hop Shop. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about like, okay, instead of an observer this time, I'm a part of it. And I want to show my best. So if I'm hitting the stage with you, you go see something different. It was in me, it was part of the hip hop culture. But I think the people who stood out during that time, I mean, there's people in that era of storytelling in Chicago who have movies that's coming out, who have TV shows that's going to be coming out, who's doing some amazing things even now, even myself doing things, so it's like people have blossomed somewhat, but at that time, I think we were all being creative. Like we did a show in Crystal Lake, and the producer of the show was like, Shannon, we're gonna have you go first, and then we're gonna have this person go and this person. And I'm so like, okay, you gonna put me first. I went first, and let me just say, it was hard for the next person because I'm gonna go up and I'm hitting this from a standpoint of not saying no pretty words, not being some cool storyteller type of thing. I'm about to talk to people's hearts. I'm about to touch I felt that. I want to do that. I wanted to do that. It wasn't about the competitiveness of it. It was more so just wanting to be my best. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a few different things that came up. One, community, the value of community, being around other people that have the same kind of passion and drive. I hear that a little bit. Two, I hear the drive to touch people at a deep level, right? You're not just communicate a story or entertain. You're there to create a bridge between yourself and the audience. So sometimes what can end up being the driver to tell powerful stories and to touch people at a heart level is really understanding what it feels like to not be touched and accepted and understood at a heart level in your past. Do you think that's part of your story?
Yeah, that's a lot of it. Because I don't think people are listening to me. I'm not really the person who's standing out. Even now, if we get in a crowd of people, I'm not. But then, like, if I'm on stage, and I have an audience, everybody's listening, right? So I am the center, and you have to listen because I'm on stage. I got the microphone. Mm-hmm. So I do want to be felt and heard and listened to. I think that may have been a lot of the reason that I do stories on stage and not tell certain things, because I may have felt like I wasn't listened to at certain times, so mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, I do want to be heard.
Yeah, feel me.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you.
Everybody want to be heard.
I think so too. I think that's, at the base of human experience is that we all want to feel connected and understood and heard. So let me just do a summary of where we've been. You, at an earlier point in your life, had, I would say your wake-up call came around the time of a low point where it sounds like it wasn't necessarily your life was falling apart. It was rethinking who you were going to be. And that came during a relationship and a new daughter coming into your life. You have some superpowers. You have an observer. Some of that's rooted in your own connections in your community of being around greats. Some of that is just an innate ability to really click into reality and understand it at an authentic level. But then you have a strong introvert and an extrovert, or at least a healthy extrovert, where you're willing to take it forward. It's not like Chicago helped to really be that critical time period for that, where you were moving out of an old identity piece, like, here's how I was making my life and here's how I was being, but now I'm going to step into who I am. And Chicago and community was a big part of that. So give us a sense where you see yourself going. I hear a person that's a powerful observer, a powerful storyteller, a great communicator, heart-driven person, a person with a sense of who he is. Where do you see yourself going as you go forward? What's your vision for Shannon Kaysen?
I took away a lot of things. So if I think about like early on, I was trying to be a corporate person. I was trying to be all these different things that I felt that I needed to do because it was just in my mind that I needed to do it. So then I started cutting. I say, okay, I'm not going to work for a corporation in the way that I thought before. Like I'm not trying to go up the ladder and get a pension. So I cut that out. I said, okay, I'm not even going to go for that anymore. And other things too. Like I'm not trying to be the ladies' man and be with as many, I'm not doing that. So I'm going to be comfortable in who I am as who I am. And when I started searching and finding the things that I really enjoyed doing, which was writing, telling stories, and doing those things. So for now, in the future, like even now, I got things that I need to cut away because I'm trying to do, or I have to do certain things that I don't want to do, but I have to do them because it needs to get done. But as I can partner with more people and add to the team in a sense to do certain things that needs to be done that I'm not necessarily the best at, I can get down to the core of what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And the core of what I want to do is write. That's the core of what I want to do. I got involved in telling stories, and I enjoy being on stage. I do enjoy it, but I enjoy really going into fantasy land. Mm-hmm. I enjoy really letting my mind just shift. And the things that take away from that is that I have to do things to eat, so, and I know I got to do it. So I do those things, but I just be wanting to get back to fantasy land. So I'm doing these things to get back to fantasy land. Mm-hmm. Let me get this done so I can go and just think about something weird and crazy and just I want my mind to be there more so than anywhere, so in the future I would love to get the business things settled in that fantasy land and to be able to create books, movies, TV, those types of things. That's my vision.
Yeah, this could be something our listeners could sink their teeth in. So you're talking about two difficult aspects of any creative's life, right? Managing the realities of life, just the practicalities of life, paying the bills, putting food on your table. So I hear you saying there's certain things that you're doing to keep yourself secure and safe to the best of your ability. And there's also the creative thoroughbred in you. There's like, I want to run with that. What kind of things are you doing in your life that allow you to stay healthy in that process? Do you have rituals or habits or things that you think are important to you to be able to maintain that balance? Because that's a hard balance.
Yeah, so I stay in love with stories. I try to stay in love with stories and storytelling. So I have a stack of books right here on my desk, and I'll read, and I'll still do the same thing. Like I'll read the first chapters and trying to stay in love with story and storytelling. And now with scripts, I'll read scripts or I'll watch different TV shows, but I'll be watching differently. I'm not watching necessarily just watching the TV show. I'm seeing if I can fall in love with the character, if I really, finding things. It's the same way I used to do with in the Harold Washington Library in Chicago. So staying in love with stories, but also staying in love with writing. So I might listen to, it's funny, I might listen to Martin Luther King speeches and wanting that to be a part of what I do, so those are the things that I do. Yeah. Rituals, I got to write. So I keep a journal, and I keep my journals too. So I have my journals all the way back to when I started writing, and I'll write down ideas, things I hear. Like even now I write down, like I wrote down the other day, I say ugly twins. I wrote down ugly twins because all twins are always beautiful and gorgeous, or that's the twins that I always put out. I'm like, I'll write something about some ugly twins. I got write a failure biography. Yeah. People always go on stage and they tell you all the great things they did. That would be funny if you gave them a failure.
Oh man, that'd be hard.
Awesome.
That's also valuable though. Maybe that's what keeps you healthy in your process, is constantly being able to play with the shadow.
Yeah, I try to. So if you're talking about yourself and it's all rah, 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 that's annoying. Don't nobody want to hear that, but if you're talking about yourself and then you're being a little bit honest about some of the things that's not so rah, 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 some bad guy experience in there. I have visions of robbing a bank. That kind of stuff, because I think a lot of people relate to that. So you add in a little bit of the problems, and then that makes you more real.
You have children, right?
Yeah.
All right. How many children do you have?
2.
Okay. So let's say your children have children. This is you in 40 years. Shannon Kaysen 40 years from now. And your children show up with your grandchildren. They're just little ones. And you're doing what you do. I don't know. Maybe you're in your rocker, you're reading through your journals or something. I don't know. And your grandchildren come to you and they say, Grandpa, we're hearing a lot about what success means. What do you think success is? What would you tell your grandchildren?
I would say the freedom to be yourself. Like for me, that's when I felt most successful. Financially, you should want to be able to provide for you. If you're losing yourself in doing that, they're really successful. And try hard to be yourself, doing that if you can, Stop apologizing for who you are and just be who you are. And you'll feel good about it.
I've only done, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 of these interviews already. And one common theme is certainly freedom. I mean, I hear you saying you have to give yourself permission to be free. I hear that. But you also have to put in enough effort to determine who and what you are. And I heard that in your answer too. All right, man, that's a wrap. So tell our listeners where they can go to keep up with what you're doing. What's on the hot plate for you? What are you really excited about?
My name is Shannon Kaysen. I do a podcast called Shannon Kaysen's Homemade Stories. And you can look up that on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get podcasts. Also working on a new project with WBZ. It's going to be an interesting podcast. Waiting to move forward with that and release that to the public. Working on TV and movie and those wonderful things. But those are the things I'm really excited about, writing and getting ideas for, but also my speaking engagements. You can find that at shannonkaysen.com. I do storytelling all across the country. I have shows in pretty much everywhere, but I'll be doing a lot of shows in Detroit coming up. Look out for me, shannonkaysen.com. Shannon Kaysen, that's Homemade Stories. And keep telling your story as well. Keep telling your story.
I really appreciate what you do, and you've been an inspiration already in my journey. So thank you for showing your generosity of spirit by showing up for the show and giving your story and your insights. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, folks, that's a wrap. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review on whatever platform you're listening to. This just helps put it in the hands of the people likely to get something out of it. If you'd like to dig a little deeper and see what we got cooking here at TOOWi Media, you can visit our website at TOOWiMedia.com. Wishing you grace to fill your sails today. Stay great in the meantime, and I'll see you on the next Pioneers of Insight.
Done.
Stop apologizing for who you are and just be who you are, and you'll feel good about it.